John Lennon was quoted as saying, "I had been thinking about it up in the hills in India. I still had this God will save us feeling about it. That's going to be all right. That's why I did it. I wanted to talk. I wanted to say my piece about revolution. I wanted to tell you, or whoever listens, to communicate, to say, what do you say? This is what I say." Revolution and Revolution 1. Two outstanding tracks where the Beatles, specifically John Lennon, finally took a stance on the social upheaval going on in the late 60s. John had always wanted to speak out about the Vietnam War, but had been held back from doing so by manager Brian Epstein. He finally decided with Revolution to say something. The something being that he was for revolution, but not in a violent sense. Which is strange considering how intense the single release of this track is. The version that appears on the White Album, Revolution 1, was the first to be recorded, but the second to be released. John began writing the song while on the famous excursion to India in 1968. He was heavily driven by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Vietnam War. Although claiming he was held back by Epstein, he too also felt apprehension of saying something about it all. He understood that by taking a stand, he may drive away some of his fans. The group went into the studio to record in May. This would be the first track laid down for the White Album. The band originated with 16 takes of the song. During the end of one of the takes, John and Yoko started moaning and screaming into the microphones. This, and many other bizarre noises, would make up the last 6 minutes or so of the take. It would be this initial experimentation that would lead to the creation of Revolution 9. Lennon, again not caring for his vocals, tried lying on his back and singing. Brian Gibson, an engineer in the studio, said, "It struck me as somewhat odd, a little eccentric, but they were always looking for a different sound, something new." Many of these takes would be released, remixed, and used even in the Love remixes. There was even an 11-minute version leaked in 2009. The slower, more bluesy take was what John wanted to be released as a single, but Paul and George did not agree. They felt that if it was going to be a single release, it needed to be bigger and more up-tempo. They basically egged John on to almost say, if you want this to be a single, it has to sound like one. John hit back musically, and he hit back hard. George Martin said that with the re-recorded version that they went to the limit and beyond. They plugged the guitars directly into the board at Abbey Road and overloaded it on purpose. John double-tracked his vocals in high energy to really drive the intensity of the piece home. Nicky Hopkins provided the keyboards for this track. In August, the song was released as a B-side. John was dissatisfied that Hey Jude was released as the A-side. Apparently people were so not used to the heavy distortion that they brought the records back to the store, complaining that it was scratched or damaged. Michael Lindsay-Hogg directed the promotional video for the song. For it, the group sang over an instrumental recording and mimed their instruments. The film was shown on Top of the Pops in the UK and the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour in the United States. Years later in 1987, the song would be the first Beatles track ever used for a commercial. Nike bought the license to the song, but the three surviving Beatles heavily disapproved and actually sued them. George Harrison said, "If it's allowed to happen, every Beatles song ever recorded is going to be in advertising for women's underwear and sausages." Paul felt the company was misusing the song, saying, "Revolution means revolution, not a pair of sneakers." The only person who did approve was Yoko Ono, who apparently through Apple they had got the license from. She said the ad made John's music accessible to a new generation. Revolution is a monster track. It and Helter Skelter popularized the use of heavy distortion in guitars. I always like to point to these two tracks as the Beatles inventing what would eventually become heavy metal. It's impossible to hear the single version and not get pumped up. I like both versions, but that single track is my absolute favorite. It's loud, it's distorted, and it feels like a jolt of lightning to the soul. Special thanks to Master Keck for suggesting this track. If you have a track, an album, a video, or anything Beatle-related or not Beatle-related that you'd like to hear me talk about, please leave your comment below. Thank you so much for watching. Help support this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing, and I will see you guys next time.